Are you going to apologize like Cory Booker
Apologize
has called
for what?
Cory Booker's called for it.
Cory should apologize. He knows better. There's not a racist bone in my body. I've been involved in civil rights my whole career.
You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking.
Joe Biden is under fire this evening on comments he made about working alongside segregationist senators in the past.
Biden recalling his early Senate career, bringing up two segregationist senators, Herman Talmadge and James Eastland, who called African Americans an inferior race. I was in a caucus with James O. Eastland, Biden said. He never called me boy. He always called me son. At least there was some civility. We got things done. We didn't agree on much of anything. We got things done.
I think the two-party system, although my Democratic colleagues don't like me saying this, I think the two-party system is good for the South and good for the Negro, good for the black in the South. Other than the fact that they still call me boy, I think they've changed their mind a little bit.
They're going to put you all back in chains.
30 seconds or less. What kind of a chance would a northeastern liberal like Joe Biden stand in the South if you were running in Democratic primaries against Southerners like Mark Warner and John Edwards?
Better than anybody else. And you don't know my state. My state was a slave state. My state is a border state. My state is the 8th largest black population in the country. My state is anything from a northeast liberal state. Not the first sort of mainstream African American. Who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice-looking guy. I mean, that's a storybook, man.
When I marched in the Civil Rights Movement, I did not march with a 12-point program. I marched with tens of thousands of others to change attitudes. And we changed attitudes. When I was 17 years old, like many of you, I participated in sit-ins to desegregate the restaurants and movie houses of Wilmington, Delaware. I came out of the Civil Rights Movement. I was one of those guys that sat in and marched and all that stuff. During the 60s, I was, in fact, very concerned about the Civil Rights Movement. I was not an activist. I worked at an all-black swimming pool in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. I was involved in what they were thinking, what they were feeling. I was involved, but I was not out marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else. I was a suburbanite kid who got a dose of exposure to what was happening to black Americans when I'm in my own city.
You know, when I was a teenager in Delaware, for real, I got involved in the civil rights movement. We have the 8th largest black population in America. Most people don't know that. And I'd go to 8 o'clock Mass, then I'd go to Reverend Herring's church where we'd meet in order to organize and figure where we were going to go, whether we were going to desegregate the Rialto movie theater or what we were going to do. I got my education for real in the black church. And that's not hyperbole, it's a fact. But I got my education, Reverend Doc, in the black church. Not a joke. Because when we used to get organized on Sundays to go out and desegregate movie theaters and things like that, we do it through the black church. In October, I was invited to the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis to receive the Freedom Award. A thing when I sat in black churches in the east side of Wilmington getting ready to, and by the way, next to two Jewish rabbis, getting ready to go out and desegregate movie theaters in Delaware. I never, ever thought in my life I would be worthy of, and I'm still not sure I'm worthy of it.
I was not an activist. I worked at an all-black swimming pool. I was involved, but I was not out marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else.
And by the way, you know, I sit on the stand, and it get hot. I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again. They'd look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap. We have this notion that somehow if you're poor, you cannot do it. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. This president and the Ku Klux Klans and the rest of them, they think they've beaten us again. But they have no idea. We're just coming back.
You can run on for a long time. Run on for a long time.
Robert C. Byrd elevated the Senate. Every time I sat with a leader, I never called Senator Byrd Senator. I always called him leader. So, boss, for a lot of us, he was a friend, and he was a mentor, and he was a guide. So I made a promise that no matter where I was, if he called me and said he needed my vote, I'd drop whatever I was doing and I'd come. And I kept the commitment. The only one, I might add. That got me back in his good graces again.
What do you see as the biggest problem with the Reform Party right now?
Well, you've got David Duke just joined, a bigot, a racist, a problem. I mean, this is not exactly the people you want in your party.
Trump started dating Cara in 2001, and some believe that she was the love of his life. I asked Cara about it. I asked Cara what she thought about the article implying that Trump refused to love her because she's black.
I would never go out with anybody that was a racist. Of course not. That's crazy. I never did, even when I was younger. Right. And if they were, I taught them differently.
Because he has this sense of the curious and a will to risk to make things better. And so aside from all of his style and his pizzazz, he's a serious person who's an effective builder of people. Last year he was a part of our workshop, of our panel workshop on what are the challenges and opportunities. And so this, a year later, Donald Trump, for a few minutes, challenges and opportunities to embrace the underserved communities. Donald Trump.
And I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally.
Biden was criticizing Mitt Romney's promise to loosen the new regulations on the big banks and Wall Street, but it was how Biden said it.
He's going to let the big banks once again write their own rules. Unchain Wall Street. They're going to put you all back in chains.
Another thing about how perspectives change over time. Bobby Rush, member of Congress, said the other day, "I'm ashamed that I voted for the '94 crime bill." You ashamed of that bill?
Not at all. And in fact, I drafted the bill, as you remember.
I know that.
Unless we do something about that cadre of young people, tens of thousands of them, born out of wedlock, without parents, without supervision, without any structure, without any conscience developing, because they literally, I yield myself 3 more minutes, because they literally have not been socialized. They literally have not had an opportunity. We should focus on them now, not out of a liberal instinct for love, brother, and humanity, although I think that's a good instinct, but for simple, pragmatic reasons. If we don't, they will, or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now. And Madam President, we have predators on our streets that society has, in fact, in part because of its neglect, created. Again, it does not mean because we created them that we somehow forgive them or do not take them out of society to protect my family and yours from them. They are beyond the pale, many of those people. Beyond the pale. And it's a sad commentary on society. We have no choice but to take them out of society.
Mass incarceration has put hundreds of thousands behind bars for minor offenses. Joe Biden wrote those laws.
Every major crime bill that's come out of this Congress has had the name Joe Biden on that bill.
We do everything but hang people for jaywalking in this bill.
Joe Biden's policies destroyed millions of black lives. Joe Biden may not remember, but we do.
But I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black, take a look at my record, man.
When I marched in the civil rights movement, I marched with tens of thousands of others.
He had not actually marched during the civil rights movement and kept telling the story anyway.
I came out of the civil rights movement. I was one of those guys that sat in and marched and all that stuff.
Now, his aides went back to say, look, he was in office marching for the idea.
That's not the word marching on Twitter.
I was not out marching.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black,
They're going to put you all back in chains.
and you ain't black. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. You ain't black. You ain't black. You ain't black. You ain't black.
The most racist thing a person could tell me is that I'm supposed to choose something based on my race.
You ain't black.